Brandon Thurston from Wrestlenomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Delivering on the returns, increasing our margins.
Ratings go down the toilet if I'm not here.
All I do is simply put the math in my favor.
We agree that Brandon and John do good work.
The reason is simple wrestling economics.
I've been told the Netflix numbers. I've been told the metrics a little bit, probably 5 different times. I still don't get it.
There were respectable wrestling journalists who needed answers.
Thank you very much, members of the media. I hope you all go to hell.
How about we pop a number right here, right now?
Whole part of the show, man.
Here we are for a special Wednesday edition of Pollock and Thurston. I am John Pollock, joined by Brandon Thurston, who is reporting live from Wrestlenomics HQ. And why a day early? Well, because I have a flight to catch tonight and will be reeling from a red-eye flight to London, England on Thursday. And thus, we were not going to be relying on British Wi-Fi to bring you this show on Thursday. So here we are, a day early, but no shortage of news to discuss. How are you, Brandon?
I'm fine. I was wondering before we get started here, are we impacted by the ongoing tariff, the negotiations that are happening between the United States and Canada? I think I have to charge you some tariffs for entering into my airspace here.
We are at odds. Our Prime Minister Mark Carney is fighting fire with fire. Doling out his own tariffs, and we are. It's hard to keep up to date on what state of relations we are having with you folks. I think we're on a bit of a downward slope at the moment, but I'm sure things will patch themselves up for at least the protection of the auto industry, I hope.
Yeah, we might have to rename some lakes as well. That's
you guys are taking that from us too, right? You want our country wasn't enough. You also want Lake Ontario as well. How dare you? Lake America?
Yes.
Would you dare step foot in Lake America?
I don't know. I saw the local news yesterday, and Dennis from Akron was there, and he's all for what the president is all about. But even renaming Lake Ontario is a little bit too far.
Okay. Well, we will. I think there are certain things that would be on the table for us. Vetoing who we can make trade deals with, affecting French as our second language, maybe not. But maybe lakes are on the table that we could discuss. Mm-hmm. Well, today we are going to be discussing the WWE merger settlement. Has the final chapter been written? Well, it was a very expensive chapter. We'll go over that. We had this ESPN WWE report that ESPN came out swinging regarding on Tuesday, and we'll also be discussing some case updates. We're going to talk about Will Ospreay's hopes of hitting 50,000 tickets. A clear WrestleTix patron is one William Ospreay.
He's checking, apparently. He knows where the numbers are, or he's just being told by AEW's live events team. Or maybe he has access to the Ticketmaster, or in this case, Live Nation app.
Yes. Did you two not have a bit of an interaction after the first turnstile count, and he had gotten his tattoo already?
Not directly. I think he's probably reacting to like wrestle purists doing their version of whatever the number was from the turnstile count. I did now speaking of which, we've got to talk about All In 2026 coming up this Sunday, correct? Is there going to be a turnstile count? I've been in touch with the Borough of Brent, asking them, what's the best way to ensure that I get this number right away, because in other times they've given it to others. They told me to do a records request. This was 2024, so I did a records request, but then they just emailed the number to somebody, which I then confirmed with the Borough of Brent personnel. So I'm engaging with them today, and they told me to do a FOIA request, and I asked them, okay, I'll do that, but you also 2 years ago just confirmed it by email. will that be happening? And what's the way that I can get the number as soon as possible?
Well, I am simply serving as your backup. I will be staying in Brent, and you just give me the word, okay?
Oh,
I'll knock on some doors
just go to
if necessary.
I mean, seriously, if you want to, that would be best. If you want to go to the building, I can gather that information for you.
Me and Neil Flanagan will make a day trip out of going to the Brent Council. We are going to knock on the door, and I
can tell you exactly who to look for. Yeah.
I just wonder if stating that we are here on behalf of Brandon Thurston will open the door or cause the authorities to come and arrest us.
No, I think all wrestling people are just grouped together as one, as we learned again this week.
Maybe there'll be a long line. Maybe I'll get there. It's like all of wrestling media will be lined up for that turnstile count to be released. That would be a great announcement. That should be what AEW does the day after All In. They hold a whole press conference to reveal every number.
I would be in favor of that.
Let's start. We'll get to All In London. Let's talk about this merger settlement because we got a 46-page series of documents released today announcing the settlement that has officially been reached involving the Laborers District Council and Contractors Pension Fund of Ohio. Sounds like a very menacing group name for a future group. And Dennis Palkin as well, listed here, with defendants Vince McMahon, Nick Khan, Paul Levesque, George Barrios, and Michelle Wilson, which is pending approval of the court, but a settlement agreement in principle, which was made back on June the 5th for $147,500,000 in cash. Stipulates in cash. It's a lot of briefcases.
So we knew this because this is what one of the plaintiff's attorneys disclosed in a letter a week or two ago, responding to the delays in getting this document executed. Now, this is executed, by the way, not by the judge yet. That's important, and that still has to happen. But now all the parties have signed this thing, and now it has been filed. So there were delays in getting this document filed, which has now been filed. Probably this was filed last night, but then appeared on the docket this morning. $147.5 million is the number, and that's not new news. Attorney Kimberly Evans disclosed that in a letter a couple of weeks ago, responding to TKO's 10Q quarterly filing, where they said we've got to pay $105 million, and $75 million of that is going to be covered by insurance. And she said, "Oh no, there's more. It's the total number is $147.5 million. Presumably, the remainder between $147.5 million and $105 million is the portion that Vince is going to pay."
Happy birthday.
It was his birthday on Monday. I heard he's now 81 years old. Vince is. There's some other information of note in here in that there's I believe a 33%. Let's see here. Plaintiff's counsel will apply for an award of attorney's fees and expenses in an amount not to exceed 33% of the settlement fund. So that means the plaintiff attorneys, this is why merger lawsuits are pursued as they are, because it's worthwhile when we're talking about big companies. They can get 33% of this $147.5 million, and that's somewhere in the 40s. So we do the math here, but somewhere in the $40 million range is what these two law firms, I think it's going to be limited to these two law firms, Block Leviton and BLBG, the two co-lead counsel. Other takeaways here that you had, there's an incentive awards that I believe is going to be capped. It wasn't clear to me if this is going directly to the plaintiffs themselves, or there's some sort of $5,000 incentive award for the Ohio Laborers Pension Fund and for Dennis Palkin. So they get a little bit of an incentive for pushing this thing forward. There's intra-defendants discussions here that I thought was interesting. So what we've seen leading up to this is that there was a delay because there was some sort of narrow dispute between WWE, that is the D&O defendants, and Vince McMahon as far as indemnification and insurance issues. And what we have here are some mentioning of the preserved intra-defendants claims Those have not been disclosed exactly what those are. So maybe there's some continued litigation that's happening here, either informally, certainly informally at this point, as far as we know, between WWE and Vince, as far as who's going to pay how much and whether insurance is going to cover it.
Yeah. So that remains kind of the we really don't get into any kind of substance here about what this narrow disagreement was or how it was resolved, but nevertheless, it seems that they reached whatever resolution was necessary to reach this amount. It's also stated here that the defendants deny all allegations of wrongdoing, fault, liability, legal violations, or damage to the plaintiffs or any other member of the class, and further deny that plaintiffs have asserted a valid claim as to any of them. The defendants further deny that they engaged in any wrongdoing or committed or aided or abetted any violation of law or breaches of fiduciary duty or engaged in any wrongdoing whatsoever, and believe that they acted properly, in good faith, and in a manner consistent with their legal duties, and are entering into this settlement and stipulation solely to avoid the substantial burden, expense, inconvenience, and distraction of continued litigation, and to resolve each of the released plaintiffs' claims as defined below and against the defendants' parties as defined below. It is not to be construed or deemed to be evidence of or an admission, concession, or presumption on the part of any of the defendants or WWE with respect to any claim or factual allegation or of any fault or liability or wrongdoing or damage whatsoever or any infirmity in the defenses that any of the defendants have or could have asserted in the action or in any other action. Nothing went wrong.
Nobody's admitting to any wrongdoing. This is similar to Vince's order from the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding the non-disclosure payments that were not disclosed when they were incurred. Vince admits to no wrongdoing as a result of that SEC order. This is not unusual in this merger lawsuit settlement. The defendants are not admitting to any wrongdoing, any impropriety. They didn't do anything wrong. They're not. You should not read this settlement. You should not look at the $147.5 million settlement and say, that's an admission of wrongdoing. That's what they're memorializing here. This is not WWE or Vince saying they did anything wrong.
No, this is just a distraction tax.
They avoided going to trial. They avoided the expense of being at trial, and they avoided maybe a more costly judgment as a result of trial.
So that is the final figure, $147.5 million. In terms of, the amount of information that came out of this process, I think that is ultimately what this case is going to be remembered for, that we learned a whole lot more about the entire process of the WWE UFC merger of 2023. We got a ton of insight, and a lot of that should be credited toward you, Brandon, that pursued this more so than anybody else. And in terms of just shining a light on a lot of the dealings of this, I think we were that much more informed coming out of this, even though this case did not make it to trial. But it's not as though there was not some level of exposure for TKO, that you did get to see the machinations of this entire set of dealings.
We did have to pull some teeth. I'm afraid we're not done pulling teeth yet. There is a third notice of challenge that is in process now. So I don't think we're done getting all of the information that we may get as a result of this case. Another thing that we learned as a result of this document is that I believe that if I look at the class, we have a definition of the class. So this may affect some of our listeners, who's going to get money here as a result of this settlement? Yeah, the firms are going to get millions of dollars for litigating this, the plaintiff attorney firms, that is, but also the class. That's what this whole thing is supposed to benefit, right? The class means a non-opt-out class consisting of all record holders and beneficial owners of W Class A common stock, think of that as the non-McMahon stock, whose shares were exchanged for, or who had the right to receive in exchange shares of TKO at the closing of the merger on September 12, 2023. That is the closing, but excluding the excluded persons. And that basically means you're a family member of one of the defendants, or you're one of the defendants themselves, and things to that effect. Point being, if you held WWE shares at the end of WWE being an independent stock, which was on September 12th, 2023, that day where everybody goes to the New York Stock Exchange, Vince and Ari and Dana and Paul and Nick, and they're all there, and Mark, and they're all taking pictures with each other. That's September 12th, 2023. They ring the opening bell. WWE shares become 1-to-1 TKO shares. If you held WWE shares on that day, I think that's all you got to do, is my reading, then you get a proportionate amount of this settlement. Doing the math, I think it's going to come out to something like less than $2 per share. But let's say you had 100 shares in W stock on that day, you might get $100 or $200 or something like that. Of course, if you had millions of dollars worth of W stock, you get a lot more. But that's something that we had kind of discussed. That there's going to be a class, there's going to be a time period within which you would have had to have held shares, and so now it's been defined as the day of the closing of the merger.
To put this into perspective, this settlement figure is the equivalent of what Paramount will be writing a check for after 3 weeks when the ticking fee begins, if this WBD acquisition does not wrap up by October 1st.
What is the ticking fee? Is it $150?
It's about $7 million per day, so they will reach this figure in about 3 weeks.
Okay,
and every 3 weeks they will be.
I did mark my calendar. October 1st is ticking fee day for Paramount.
Could be a national holiday in the U.S. that they will be celebrating. Also, this has nothing to do with pro wrestling, at least loosely, although California Attorney General Rob Bonta, who is moving up the power rankings in combat sports, Meta has apparently reached an agreement for being accused of violating the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which multiple states have filed this lawsuit. It appears they are about to reach a settlement for $17 billion, which I'm sure we did nothing wrong here. This is just a distraction. $17 billion. The proposed settlement would require Meta to pay up to $17 billion in penalties to the states over 10 years and to make significant changes to how its platforms operate so that they are safer for minors. So a bit of an L for Meta today. Anyway.
Yeah.
Let's talk about All In London. So what is the number that we are up to, Brandon, as we are days out from the return to Wembley Stadium? This will be their third event at the venue and taking place on Sunday afternoon.
43,017. That's the R squared continues to be strong. It has not yet hooked up into the sky here, which is what usually happens at the end in the last couple days of just about any event, not even wrestling event, probably, any event. A lot of people getting in some ticket buys at the very end, right? 43,000 it has reached, and it's continued to march forward. Will wants it to reach 50, he said.
Yeah, let's hear from Will Ospreay before Brandon gives us the Wrestlenomics projection. But this was Will Ospreay on Tuesday on Ariel Helwani's show.
My mission, honestly, I really want to try and get it to 50. I think if I can get into 50, I could really give myself a pat on the back. It would be, it's already the most amount of people that I've ever performed in a main event in front of. So that in itself, and I need to do some clarification on it, but I think it's the same with Kenny as well. I think that's a real cool, poetic thing between us, because it's always in storyline. He's always looked down on me, I was never on Kenny Omega's level, but it took both of us to be able to reach that number, which is great, and it's amazing. I'm super determined to do everything I can. I know I'm doing a couple media rounds, and I'm doing some big interviews coming up soon, so I'm hoping that I can talk the public into coming over and just putting it over 50.
He did wrestle on All In 2023, right? That's why he got the tattoo.
He's been on both Wembley shows, but this is the first one he is headlining.
Okay.
Yeah, that's his clarification. So this would be it does. Yeah, he made it. He did word it that this is the largest crowd I've ever headlined a show in front of, because this would top the Tokyo Dome number.
Can it reach 50? I would be surprised if it reaches 50. Of course, you can always comp your way there, but I think this is going to land just under 50 based on the trajectory of where it's at.
Yeah, and it made me curious to pull up the old attendance spreadsheet that I believe Chris Harrington once authored. This is and when we look at if you throw out WWE shows, which obviously is
I did prepare for this. Go ahead.
Oh, look at this. Well, we have a chart all prepared. Again, like for non-WWE events, and like this is going to be among like the biggest shows of the modern era. And just looking at this, the Tokyo Dome is a very odd venue because I think we have over time realized what, generally a full Tokyo Dome can house. That, if they are at, let's just say 45,000, which I think is a pretty safe bet that this Wembley show is going to hit. Like there is no way to brand this as some kind of like failure. It is only in the comparison to, especially that first show at Wembley, which was just, it was an anomaly in many ways of the first show there, that it became like, that was the attraction, was AEW at Wembley. I think more so than any one particular match on that show, where obviously this year it's much more match driven.
Yeah, so I mean, the numbers that we're looking at here, if you're watching a video, we're looking at the top 20 attendances. I grabbed these from Cage Match, and it's dominated with Tokyo Dome. Of course, it's led by the Collision in Korea, the May Day shows, where people were probably, ordered to go to the show that day in 1995. So we have a lot of Tokyo Dome, and now we believe, as you just said, Tokyo Dome, these are very much exaggerated numbers, we believe, right? Of course, topping out at the Inoki final of 70,000, and there's lots of others in the 60 range, right? We do have some really historical stuff here, like this wrestling show in Athens in 1937. This must be like Jim Londo's event, right? 70,000 supposedly. I think there's some others, but so I said, let's exclude. We've already excluded all the W events, of course. That's why there's no WrestleManias here. But let's exclude all the Tokyo Dome, and then we don't end up with where this event, if it was run today suddenly with 43,000 Wrestle tickets distributed, it still doesn't make the top 20. We do see the 2024 All In London with the WrestleTix number for that event there. We would have to, I decided, let's just exclude everything from Japan, because we're probably still dealing with a lot of exaggerations. Like I think we've got the Kawasaki, we got some FMW Kawasaki Stadium shows with, maybe they didn't have quite 50,000, but were impressive shows. So anyway, we move on and say, let's exclude all of the Japan. So now we're talking about non-WWE North America. That's two pretty serious filters there, but okay. So it's not just non-North America, but that's probably what most of this is. Well, actually, no, because we've got Athens, we've got Karachi, Acapulco. Anyway, we do end up with this event, if it just was held today with 43,017 as the number, it does make the top 20 in that case, excluding Japan, excluding WWE. So yeah, this is, if you want to say, this is, one of the biggest shows in the history of, so this is not North America actually, right? This is of course London. This is one of the biggest shows, excluding all the Japan numbers. And it might be still, if you include the Japan numbers, we're just excluding the announced numbers that are hard to believe, unbelievable that that you can fit 60,000 even in the Tokyo Dome.
Yeah. Like this year felt like as big of an audience as they have ever attracted to the Tokyo Dome, at least of the modern era. And that was announced at 46,913 for Tanahashi's retirement match. This one probably edges past that number. And, for the year, the only ones we're looking at above that are the two nights of WrestleMania at Allegiant Stadium, which are, I would say night 2 was the show that did hit the 50,000 mark that we recently talked about last week. 50,000 seems like it, unless there is some just surge at the end. And granted, they could, they could comp their way to that number, but 50,000 would seem like it is not within reach, pending, again, some big rush of ticket buyers in these last couple of days.
Yes. So according to Las Vegas Stadium Authority, this year's WrestleMania, Sunday, 50,033. Just over 50,000 for Sunday, 47,000 for day one.
Yeah, so night one, I think, is within reach. Obviously, gates are going to be very different for this. I don't even know if we will get a gate figure for All In, but in terms of like just sheer numbers, now this could end up being like the number 2 show of the year. I would say number 1 would be that would be quite the achievement in this final week if they were to surpass the 50 mark.
Yes.
And do we finish off this show with the announcement of a return to Wembley?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I think it's successful enough, and Tony seems to be insistent on it. Yeah, unless Taylor Swift's going to tour again.
Yeah, I guess we do not know the Taylor Swift touring schedule unless it's being held off on. So that will be the big story to watch this week. Do you imagine? Are you going to subject yourself to any wrestling this week? You know, you've gotten some complaints about people that why you don't watch enough wrestling, Brandon. I mean. How?
Yes.
How could you not? How can you not watch wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it. I mean, this is something I asked you about. Like, should I watch more wrestling? I don't know.
I think I gave you a hard no.
Yeah, you told me no. You told me to stop. You told me to stop watching wrestling. In fact, no, you didn't. So I think, you know, if I was reviewing Raw, of course, I have to watch Raw. If I was reviewing the pay-per-views, I would have to do that. I think probably the issue last week is that we were talking about talent ages relative to their winning percentage, and that's more like it's closer to talking about the content. Now, does watching All In and WrestleMania and SummerSlam help me understand legal filings and all this stuff and do records requests? No. I mean, I'm open to it, but I'm not compelled to watch wrestling. And in fact, I think this may sound like an excuse, but I think there is at least a gross negative in that, like, when you watch wrestling and then you develop some opinion about the content, I think just about everybody who watches wrestling is tempted to project their opinion and preference about what they want to see, what direction they want to see the content go in, onto business outcomes, which is like, you know, every promoter does that, every booker does that, and being disconnected from that is a gross benefit.
Like, I think you are in such a unique position that like there are a few people that would have like your backgrounds that if the argument would be you not watching wrestling is somehow a disconnect from the subject matter that you cover. I think among people that cover this, you have the experience that pretty much no one that is reporting at this level has, that has been involved in wrestling, in training, that could probably break it down and go in circles around people. But I would encourage you that what time would you be dedicated to following wrestling on a weekly basis of what those hours could be better spent using? I think this is my biggest problem is deciphering what is the best usage of my time. And I don't think you would be any better at your job by allotting 5 hours a week to watching wrestling. That could be way better served elsewhere.
I think there's some incremental improvements or you know, things to add from watching it, in that, like, if you're watching it and you're really in touch with the storylines and what's going on, you have some kind of better understanding and connection about maybe why fan sentiment is turning in a certain way. Again, I think that's very hazardous to, like, putting your opinion, your own preference in there, but you on its face, you have some connection and understanding to, you know, if fans are feeling a certain way about a product or a storyline, well, at least you're watching it all the time, and you can explain how those things are connected.
We're going to move on to the story that came out on Tuesday, and this became a big focus because we did get
the refresh while I do
that. So on Tuesday, there was a report from BJ Bethel of SE Scoops, and this garnered a lot of attention because he was reporting that the ESPN deal with WWE that went into effect last year and is set for a 5-year term at $1.6 billion over the length of those 5 years. Bethel reported that the deal would not be renewed at its expiration. He cited several sources that indicated the deal faced, quote, several problems, including the current media market, culture and synergy issues between the two companies, and the failure of cable providers to pick up the cost of the app for customers. And so we had reached out to both WWE and ESPN in particular responded to us and a lot of outlets and were pretty strong in denying this report. Ben Cafardo of ESPN tweeted out this statement and provided it to outlets, including ours, that, quote, there is no truth to the report that we have decided not to renew. They never checked with us before publishing, and had they, we would have told them that was completely false. So, Brandon, you did contact BJ Bethel as well for his response to this. And while he did attempt to make outreach, I don't think it was to the level that you would that crossed the finish line, I would say, for this. I think this does become like this journalism question of, the need to reach out for comment on a story. It's obviously preferred that you speak to all parties and give them the opportunity to respond. The question would have been here had BJ received a denial from ESPN. At least he would have included that in the story. Would he have still run it? That's for him to decide here. He is stating that he is standing by this story, but this was a very strong denial by ESPN regarding this, and with so many years left on the deal itself.
The timeline for me experiencing this is that I have my day starts with Reddit squared circle, the new tab on. It's on auto refresh like every 2 minutes or something like that. So that tends to be a good source for finding new news stories that are important, as well as stuff that's not as important to me. But I saw that on the I think I might have even seen it on the main hot tab, which is like whatever's going to be pushed into people's feeds, right? And I saw that story, and so I looked at it and looked at the substance of it and said, all right, let me reach out to ESPN PR. And I contacted ESPN PR and I said, is there anything to this? I emailed WWE about the same time and asked them if there's anything to this. And ESPN eventually put out a statement saying, which we read it already, denying it strongly and saying there's no truth to the report that we have decided not to renew. They never checked with us before publishing, and had they, we would have told them that was completely false. So I called up BJ Bethel and asked him if that was true. I mean, we were discussing this at the time. The way that, because of what they've said here and what they've put on the record, that's going to go into a story, we've got to ask BJ now, did he reach out, or what was the nature of his contact to ESPN? And he explained that he used a contact form that he found, which he provided me the link with, and I believe he's also tweeted the link to that. It's a fan support contact form. He says he called a number that he gave to me, and I called it, and it's a fan support phone number as well. So that's the extent of his reach out. Take that for what you think it's worth. It's not that hard to find press release contacts. A lot of times a press release, if you're a budding wrestling journalist, a lot of time press email addresses and phone numbers, oftentimes for that matter, will be found at the bottom of a press release. That's a good place to start. So I believe BJ has acknowledged that he has since remembered that he did have contact with Ben Cafardo, so he did have his email address that he could have used. So there's that.
And this is just coming in. This was sent out just before we started the show from SE Scoops. That yesterday we published a report from BJ Bethel on WWE's relationship with ESPN. We are retracting that story in its entirety. Before a story like this runs, the subject deserves a direct chance to respond, and that step wasn't taken to the appropriate standard. Since publication, it's come to light that this effort fell way short. We ran it, and the buck stops with us. We've parted ways with Mr. Bethel, have had our verification procedures reviewed by an outside partner, and updated our process as a result. So that is the fallout of this story for BJ, who I don't know as well, but I think for anyone that is in the media space, I'm not a big fan of just the pile-on nature, but that kind of comes with the territory, and probably at different points, all of us have been subjected to it at some points. I think as a general practice, it's always helpful, and I have no idea what BJ's process is, who he works with, whatever it is. I think it is always super helpful that when you're working on something, especially like a pretty big story, to have a different perspective, to have a different set of eyes. There are, like, the way Brandon and I work is that we are constantly back and forth, and there will be things that I'll have Brandon look over my work. Like, what am I missing here? And whenever you're trying to report out a story, it's almost like it's a giant bag and you're trying to squeeze out all of the air so that everything has been accounted for. You're thinking about every potential way that this can be opposed, or like what are the blind spots? And sometimes having that second person, having a second set of eyes, that can be just someone pointing out, hey, I don't think you've crossed your T's here. I don't think you've dotted your I's on this. That can be extremely beneficial of just, just vetting yourself, and ultimately, no, you're not going to necessarily think of every way. I would say, like, this would be, if you're reaching out for comment, you have to go to the length of direct contact and making sure it's going to get in front of the right people. That I think SE Scoops concluded this did not reach that level.
I had not been aware of that. So I've clicked on the link that we have in our article to the article itself, and it's now a dead link. So they've taken that article down even. Yeah, I mean, like, I find it relatively easy to find people's contact information, but yeah, it's, you have to, if you don't know how somebody's going to kind of react to this, or you've got an inkling, a reasonable expectation that somebody might have a different point of view who's a subject in the story, or you just don't know what their point of view is and you haven't asked them yet, even though that means asking PR, and PR is going to, if you're cynical, and so a lot of times that cynicism is rightly earned, but even if you're cynical and you expect that they're just going to try to deny this and say, oh, nothing to see here, you still got to ask them. And it doesn't mean you don't have to, you can't run your story, but you have to give them the chance to say something if they want to say something. I should check my email. I have sent probably at this point hundreds of inquiries to W and to AEW that have gone, unresponded to, but that's just part of it. And, I will continue probably to send them ignored messages, but that's just, you've got to, we tried to give you a chance. If nothing else, and I don't think that's what's happened here, but if nothing else, that's a protection from any, allegation that somebody can make towards you of causing damage by doing your report. We gave you a chance to respond, and you could have gotten your point of view out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is. It's the kind of, it should not be the goal to just, report something and it's a surprise to all parties involved. Like, in theory, they should know what's coming. They should have a reasonable amount of time. You don't have to give them 2 weeks to respond to something. And even if they deny it, again, that doesn't mean it kills your story. If you ultimately believe that what you have is a factual story, is, they are entitled to comment on it in preparation for it, and you just be as clear as, hey, this is my understanding of things. This is the perspective of this party involved with this that is at least stating something. And, quite often you will ask people for confirmation on something, and that will generally go ignored. But man, when they are ready to deny something, man, do people pick up the phone and call.
They sure did in this case. I think, there were multiple outlets that had the ESPN statement about, denying this. And there seems to be some background sources that were saying similar, just before the official comment was available.
Yeah.
Just to add, I can totally believe, I find it plausible that the relationship between ESPN isn't as good as some of WWE's other relationships with its media partners. For one thing, PLEs are now being broadcast to a smaller audience than when they were on Peacock. Maybe there's some tension over, at least, certainly we're seeing it from viewers, right, who aren't used to seeing professional wrestling on ESPN, the strongest brand in broadcast sports, who are uncomfortable with seeing a work sport on their favorite sports channel. I don't know if it's hard to parse the degree to which this ESPN Unlimited app is successful or not. But it's much more plausible to me that this is a relationship that's had some bumps. We've reported on the letter grade issue involving Andreas Hale, and I don't think that's a factor in the relationship overall, or a factor into whether this deal is going to get renewed in 2030, by the way. But it's plausible to me that this relationship is not perfect, or is not as healthy as some of their other relationships. Now, whether or not this deal is going to be renewed, I think
4 years is a long time.
Unless Burke Magnus is talking openly with people about, yep, we're not going to renew that, then that's harder to swallow.
Yeah. On the subject of ESPN Unlimited, it's time for a price increase. Happy birthday, ESPN Unlimited, where they're hoping that your funds are, in fact, unlimited, because now what cost you $29.99 is now moving up to $31.99. This coming first from John Lewis of Sports Media Watch, while the annual plan will move up from $300 to $320. And I can only hope that we get another round of these on-screen WWE ads where performers inform us how to sign up for the ESPN plan. So this is the tried and true formula for every single streamer. Get you in the door and then slowly just put the frog in boiling water and increase the temperature. And this also comes on the heels on Peacock increasing its prices. So it's more and more costly to follow the WWE product across Peacock and ESPN Unlimited.
Yeah, these beatings will continue until profits improve for streaming. I think, that a lot of these things have been already. So for me as a YouTube TV subscriber, right, I finally got access to this. I can now authenticate in. I authenticated into the ESPN app, and I watched parts of SummerSlam on the ESPN Unlimited app. And I'm going to get Peacock as part of my YouTube TV subscription. So you know what the next price is that's going to be increased? It's going to be the YouTube TV subscription, right? Yes. I think these are kind of...
So you are not paying anything additional for Peacock and ESPN currently?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But that'll be a justification. I mean, they're not going to word it as explicitly as that, but that'll be a justification for why my prices are going to need to go up as the end consumer. And it's no coincidence that all of these streaming products belong to various cable networks or parent companies of cable networks. They are functioning a lot like that, except for they started outside of the bundle, right? You still will be able to have the option outside of the bundle to subscribe to Peacock or to subscribe to ESPN Unlimited. But I think eventually a lot of these, and it's already happening, right? I'm sure people listening to us have experience with, I get access to Netflix on this certain tier of cable that I have. Eventually, all these things are going to be kind of included in and baked into the various carriage agreements that, let's say, Disney has with YouTube TV. And then okay, I get access to that as part of my plan. I don't have to worry about picking and choosing these streaming services. And then my price is going to go up as a pay TV subscriber because of it.
The Netflix, we're moving on to the Paramount WBD story because this week we were supposed to get the start of settlement talks involving California Attorney General Rob Bonta with Paramount. But just at the last minute, Sunday night at midnight, Rob Bonta announced he was canceling Monday's meeting. So this comes from CNN that the parties were due to discuss a potential settlement of the lawsuit that has frozen the media mega merger in place. But Bonta called off the meeting after the Wall Street Journal reported that lawyers for both sides held a prep session on Friday and discussed what the states might want from Paramount. Quote, Paramount did not maintain the confidentiality of that meeting, Bonta said in a statement late Sunday. Not only did Paramount leak the alleged substance of settlement discussions, but they misrepresented these discussions, demonstrating a lack of good faith. As soon as Paramount stops playing games and engages sincerely, my office is happy to meet again. Paramount responded on Monday by stating, we share Attorney General Bonta's concerns about the public discussions and misreporting that has surrounded this deal. As we have assured the Attorney General's office, Paramount has not been the source of the leaks of any of our confidential discussions with the AG's office. We remain hopeful and stand ready to continue good faith discussions to resolve the Attorney General suit and move forward with our plans for increased competition and increased output to the benefit of the talent and entertainment workers. So, part of this, these details that came out was the idea that the states are looking for some kind of divestitures, and that this could include some of the cable properties involved in all of this. But they are at this standstill at the moment, and the time is ticking. The big one is October 1st when the ticking fee begins, and this will go to trial next March. And if this makes it to trial, that's going to be a lot of millions that are going to be signed over to WBD shareholders, and clearly at the top of mind of the Wall Street Journal, of CNN, of Rob Bonta.
Did you say that they might have to sell some of their TV networks?
They would have to divest in potentially some of their. That's at least what was reported here as like that is what the states are looking for, is like some type of divestitures,
like TBS and TNT.
I mean, those qualify as cable properties. Paramount is trying to merge its movie studio and TV operations with WBD, the parent of CNN, HBO, Discovery, and the Warner Brothers studio, and many others. So
if they divested, that means that they would be pressured to sell them, I think, right? So you could see TBS and TNT be among those that get sold to somebody else.
Yes.
Which just puts it in a different bucket of a large conglomerate, I guess. Okay. I mean, like, it was here. Let's speculate wildly. TBS and TNT get sold to Versant, a W partner.
Yes. Lead-in for SmackDown on Fridays.
And maybe WWE has an exclusivity clause in its contract with Versant for SmackDown. Now, this would be, I don't know, could you have a TNT and TBS that go into it before that deal expires? Is that clause still enforceable, even though they've bought this property that kind of, by virtue of buying it, immediately violates? We don't know if there's an exclusivity clause, but there is on the last deal with Raw and USA, and with SmackDown and Fox. It stands to reason that there's a good chance there's an exclusivity agreement in the existing SmackDown deal. What does that mean for AEW? And
what does that mean for TNT champion Kevin Knight? TBS champion Maya World. I mean, the Versant champions. On a serious note, with AEW, like, of the questions you would ask is, okay, like, obviously, no one's thinking about like AEW at the settlement table here. But in terms of like the actual ability for WBD to move forward, like, we are, we're still quite a ways away, about a year from now, when you would think like this option year has to be decided upon. Like there are decisions that are going to have to be made. And the longer this drags out, it's not just the time, it's also the money that is going to be going into this entire thing. And it's not a 0% chance that this deal ultimately doesn't implode as well. And you have to imagine that like at Paramount and WBD, it's like you are handcuffed to a degree. And if you're an AEW, like you're hoping for the best, but like obviously you want this wrapped up yesterday because there are going to be like decisions regarding your company and activating that option year and eventually a potential renewal that I have to imagine like any big decisions like that are all going to be on pause. And AEW is down on that priority list of many things that are going to be on pause.
Every day that goes by where they have to pay that ticking fee, that's less money that's available in the budget for everybody, including AEW, who wants a nice renewal. Yeah.
So again, like we talk about that 147 million figure, like again, that they will sign off in like every 3 weeks. They would have to sell that off. The value of this AEW deal, that's like a month of this ticking fee for the entirety of like what AEW would cost them in a year, give or take. So like we're talking like sizable amounts, even for a family, the wealth of the Ellisons. That is a tough pill to swallow when you are forfeiting that money on a daily basis for a trial that, again, the states do have the leverage here because they know this ticking fee is there and that this trial is set for March. Like they know that the squeeze is on Paramount side, not the states that can ride this one out and are not going to be against the gun of having this deadline that is self-imposed.
Is there any incentive to get a deal done like before September 30th? I mean, it seems quite likely that that's the pressure point, is like right at the end of the line where the ticking fee has to start being paid. So there's plenty of time to play games and play hardball here in late August.
I think this ticking fee is just it. I won't say it's a killer, but it has evaporated a lot, if any, leverage Paramount would have in this situation. That the states know that they have that working against Paramount.
Yes.
That maybe Paramount just, they acquiesce and give up more than they would like because they just want to avoid maybe not hitting that deadline, but going too deep into that deadline. Because this does become extremely costly. And there's also a drop dead date that this whole thing has to be completed by early June or else the deal's off. And that's another deadline on top of this.
The main question is whether Paramount is prepared to settle with structural remedies, Lightshed Partners analyst Rich Greenfield told CNN. Paramount may be correct on the law, he said, and correct to believe that it will eventually win in court, but the clock is working against the company between the October ticking fee start, the March trial date, and the June merger agreement expiration, he said.
Are you ready to talk about Linda McMahon? She had quite a week.
What did she do this week?
Let's go to CNN and hear from Stats herself, Linda McMahon.
This stat will probably blow your mind. It did mine. 1 in 10 children, statistics show 1 in 10 children before they finish high school will be sexually molested in school. So one of the things that we have really focused and really driving on is looking at what is going on in schools. There were California schools that actually were reported events of this. We've been investigating
Where did that stat come from? Did you do a study at
Yes,
your department?
We did a study, and it came from the general education statistics that were afforded to us. And so when we looked at that, and we really looked at those stats coming out of California, so we said, what is really going on here in these schools? And what happens is the teachers don't get, or sometimes it's faculty and sometimes, the staff that's working in the schools. And instead of firing those teachers just get sent to another school. And it's not part of their record or anything. So we have really been cracking down on that as well.
So when in doubt, you can always just cite, yes, we conducted a study. Is that what you could put in your endnotes on your term paper? Source, study I conducted. Now,
I'll start using that in reporting. I'll just say I did a study.
According to a study without any specifications, this stat was pretty much completely debunked, that this would be including calling somebody a name in school would qualify as this. The idea of being sexually molested in school, 1 in 10 was not a stat that really held up to any scrutiny here. But at least we know that if there were
1 in 10 ring boys.
If there were allegations of anyone underage being abused and this were brought to your attention, number one, this would hardly be any kind of laughing matter. And number two, you would make every possible, you would pull every lever at your disposal to correct this situation.
First, he was put on suspension pending investigation. The investigation was taking so long, there was so much negative happening with it that we finally told Mel that it was better for him and better for our company for him to go on in a different way.
McMahon doesn't deny Phillips had a foot fetish, but she said it had become a joke and was blown out of proportion.
You call a man filming your feet for hours at a time and playing with your feet and making you cry when you're only 13 years old and recording it for his own sexual purposes. If she calls that normal, then obviously there's something wrong with her also.
So there you have, the defendant, Linda McMahon, in the ongoing Ring Boy lawsuit, as the hypocrisy is exceptionally rich at this point. That amazingly, like this Ring Boy lawsuit, it's like this is Teflon for Linda McMahon. This thing is rarely brought up, that this is still an active lawsuit that she is named as a defendant in, as she is now standing up for the rights of children across schools.
It did come up one time in her Senate confirmation hearing, and it was, quickly moved on from.
Yes. So Linda McMahon, just reading here, it reads here that ProPublica and KQED reported in May that the state of California did not revoke the professional licenses of 67 teachers whom school districts determined sexually harassed students or committed other types of sexual misconduct from 2019 through 2025. Other schools hired at least 14 of those educators, with at least 12 of those still working in the education as of May, according to the reporting. The Education Department responded to that reporting by launching an investigation into the Los Angeles Unified School District, as well as a nationwide effort to crack down on teachers harassing students. The former probe centers on the district's alleged agreements with the United Teachers of Los Angeles Union that it will reassign and not terminate teachers that are credibly accused of having a sexual or romantic relationship with a student, creating child pornography, and failing to report suspected child abuse, according to a letter that Linda McMahon penned to educational institutions in July. Make no mistake, the department will fully enforce federal law and employ every resource at its disposal to protect children from sexual predators, the education secretary wrote. Those schools that allow sexual misconduct to occur risk the termination of applicable federal assistance provided by the federal government.
Yes.
So this is Linda McMahon's current battle that she is going on. But she got excoriated for this appearance on CNN and this stat that she that she gave out. I don't believe
these articles don't mention these articles don't mention the Ring Boy lawsuit, do they?
Not that I could find.
Looking through a few of them, yeah.
Yeah, it is amazing that is not brought up beyond like wrestling centric stories that might focus on this as well. Final stories. You have an update on the Omari Palmer Nunez case that we had talked about quite a while ago. What is the latest on this? This is the former Odyssey Jones, who was in WWE, was let go, and now he has been wrestling with All Japan. He's been working with MLW. What is the state of this case?
So this case has been inactive for quite a while. The background story here, right? What this stems from is Odyssey Jones was fired from WWE after a former girlfriend made claims of abuse against him, domestic abuse. And then he was pretty quickly let go. Pretty shortly after he was debuting on Raw, he filed a restraining order against her, And now we've got a defamation case happening here. So then this has been going on for well over a year. The case has been inactive for almost 1 year. And the judge filed a notice of lack of prosecution / court's motion to dismiss. Basically, this case has been inactive for so long that they're saying, okay, you've got 60 days from August 3rd to put some activity on this case, or we're going to dismiss it. I did reach out to Omari Palmer, and he didn't have a comment. But I don't know if there's some action that's going to happen here. We'll see. So that's roughly what? October. By early October, there has to be some sort of movement on here. We do see that there's been a subpoena that was issued to Maitland Nunez, who's the defendant, and I've been checking in on this case every now and then. We did do some reporting on this, so I just wanted to follow up to make sure we're seeing this out to the conclusion. Mm-hmm. And I'd been wondering what the deal was, because this has been inactive for such a long time. So this might be going away if there's no activity on it by early October.
The last story, Nielsen. Are you ready, Brandon, for some changes that Nielsen is bringing? It's almost like the new fall lineup for Nielsen. How are we going to tabulate ratings this year? Well, they have pissed off the big dog. Not Roman Reigns, but instead the NFL. This comes from the Associated Press. The NFL is upset about changes made by Nielsen in its methodology for measuring viewership for the upcoming season, calling them, quote, rushed, and saying they will have a negative impact on sports. Nielsen announced plans this week to change how it measures audiences on television beginning August 31st, including alterations to how the company measures whether multiple people are watching an event at the same time. The NFL is coming off one of its most successful seasons ever on television after Nielsen began using its big data plus panel methodology for all events last September. The league averaged 18.7 million viewers per game, an increase of 10% from 2024, and largest for a season since 1989. The Super Bowl had an audience of almost 125 million. And Paul Ballew, the league's head of data and analytics, said on a conference call Thursday that the league was still trying to understand how the changes will impact ratings this season. Quote, we don't have enough impact data to fully assess. We're still trying to make sense of it. We're still trying to make sense of some of the logic behind some of the methodological changes. From our initial impact, it looks like a negative for sports. On the other side, co-viewing or partial co-viewing implementation is a positive. So we're going to have to continue to spend some time pulling this apart and making sense of it. Ballew said the priority for the league is to find the most accurate number for the audience, as well as having a deeper understanding of the demographics of the viewership. Nielsen has been working with partners for a while on the changes and nearly implemented them last October, but waited until this season instead. Nielsen did put out a statement that it's delivering the most accurate TV measurement ever, especially when it comes to live sports. We have worked closely with clients, sports leagues, and industry regulators, doesn't mention media, to constantly enhance our methodologies. That includes the introduction of big data plus panel, the expansion of our out-of-home measurement, and a pilot test of co-viewing updates, which are all successful examples of collaboration that lead into the enhancements.
Okay. I mean, if the NFL is upset, that matters a lot, right?
A lot.
Because this is the by far the biggest telecasts on television with any regularity. Nielsen needs a competitor, right? And
Video Amp.
And there's others too. Arbitron, right? If you look at some of what Nielsen's lawsuits are, they haven't sued media companies for reporting TV ratings, but what they have sued is many of their competitors. And you know, this is clearly an industry that needs more competition. I'm not sure if it's got it. And
does Nielsen have monopolistic status? Do they have those protections? Because I get the impression they feel like data of viewing audiences is their exclusive domain, that nobody else can know this.
What makes you say that?
I'm just a hunch.
Yeah. Nielsen has sued many of its competitors, and I remember seeing, I would have to pull it up, there was an opinion from the court earlier this year, with a pretty stern opinion, talking about the antitrust case that I'm referring to against Nielsen. So in this environment where there's television viewership as well as streaming viewership And here we are, we're sitting here and we don't know how many people are watching SummerSlam on ESPN Unlimited, exclusively on streaming. We don't know how many people are watching Dynamite on HBO Max. I mean, if you're an advertiser, what are you buying?
It's the question we have always asked about, like, this bizarre mystery that are the HBO Max numbers, that at AEW's word, they do not have access to this. And I don't know how you operate when you cannot talk to clients and partners and be able to tell them your fully rounded audience that you are reaching. Number two is that this is the period that we have seen much more on the UFC/MMA side with Netflix and Paramount, that, man, you can come up with some really crazy formulas to get to these numbers, and generally people will just run with the first number they see, and that becomes the go-to number. And it becomes very easy to, like, you can juice up these numbers a lot, and not too many people are going to parse and say, well, this is based on, like, people who watched at least 1 minute of this broadcast, which is not how Nielsen reports its audience. But it's a big shiny number, and that's going to grab the headline, and everyone takes with that. It's like, this is a period where it's like you can almost make up your own numbers and people will run with them. And it's happened with WWE for years when it comes to attendance. How many people will live and die off these WWE attendance numbers, even if you have, like, government entities that will give you the real number? It's too late. The first and biggest number is what everyone jumps on board and runs with.
We don't know how many people. Well, we don't have a third party, and that's the value of having something like Nielsen. Is you have this third party who's not selling advertising, who's not a TV network, who's not a content producer. They're a third party that's supposed to be disinterested, and they're measuring the audience that marketers have, advertising buyers have a fair read on what the actual size of the audience is, among other stakeholders that want to know how many people are actually watching these programs. So we barely know how many people are watching UFC on Paramount. We have the number of global accounts that are watching something like Raw exclusively on Netflix. We don't know how many people are watching it in the US. You can do some creative math and theorize a way that maybe is Dynamite being watched by more people overall in the United States between streaming and traditional TV than Raw or SmackDown? We've got people out there saying that because we don't have a Nielsen or a Nielsen-like measure of audience that's giving us a third-party, disinterested measurement of the number.
Well, this remains the struggle that people like Brandon Thurston continue to fight and extract the data from the fiction.
And if anything, you have Nielsen going after journalistic outlets that are trying to report the TV ratings, and so that there's less information about just the basic traditional TV numbers than there might be otherwise.
Which Nielsen has their reasoning, but I don't think they are strengthening, like, their purpose by going that route. Like, again, it screams the need for, like, a competent third-party competitor that could fill that vacuum that Nielsen is creating in this whole mess as well. And there's just a general, I think, however you want to approach it, that there is more skepticism towards a lot of these figures than before. And I think a lot of people have just thrown their hands in the air that have tried to make sense of a lot of these changes and trying to keep up with it, that it becomes a much tougher task of deciphering, like, what is what involving these, and just the sheer lack of transparency now when it comes to these numbers that these leagues are very much tied to, and an NFL is going to have significant pressure when it comes to if they are unhappy with this form of methodology that Nielsen is implementing.
And to be clear what I'm referring to, this is a lawsuit between Cumulus and Nielsen. This is an opinion from, I can show this on the screen. This is an opinion from January of this year, where this is the judge writing. Cumulus has shown a substantial likelihood of success on the merits in this lawsuit in Section 2 claims alleging the anti-competitiveness of Nielsen's conduct as a monopolist in the local and radio ratings data markets. Of course, that's referring to radio ratings, not television ratings, but it gives you an example of a judge reflecting on Nielsen's conduct. So there's that. I mean, I've been, I think, clear with subscribers in Wrestlenomics that, we've gotten some unhappy communications from Nielsen over the last little less than a year. So, and it's apparent that Programming Insider has stopped reporting ratings for whatever reason.
All right. On that note, circle that date. Monday, the new Nielsen methodology goes into effect.
Which is probably the date is when the universes get updated. Is the annual day where you get, it's new UE day, new universe estimate day. So the number that you have to divide, say, the number of viewers aged 18 to 49 by to get the national rating that we always talk about when we talk about the P1849 rating. That number, that denominator, it's huge. It's a huge day. That denominator will change on that day.
Is there a notification in your phone for that day?
It's on my, I think it's on my is it August 31st?
Yes.
Yeah. New Nielsen Universe Estimates. It is marked on my calendar.
Okay. Well, I look forward to Monday. Very exciting. We're going to say goodbye to everyone. A quick note. Again, I will be in London this week for All In London, and myself and Neil Flanagan are going to be doing frequent updates at postwrestlingcafe.com. If you want to jump on board for this week, we're going to be doing lots of audio updates and stuff from London. We'll be covering the Rev Pro show on Saturday, All In on Sunday, and doing a big review show with Wei Ting on Sunday night over on postwrestling.com. Brandon can be found at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, where you can support all of his great work and sample the site as well at Wrestlenomics.com and Wrestlenomics.substack.com for all the latest from Mr. Thurston. And Brandon, thank you for doing this show a day early. We wanted to get the show in this week before I head off. And we will be back next week at the normal time of Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
And hey, if we're talking about media quite a bit today, if you want media to be better and, reporting to be better, the best way to do to make that happen is to support them directly with your dollars, whatever outlets you think are actually doing a good job, rather than leaving them to rely on attention and advertising revenue. Subscription revenue is much more healthy.
It's we could go lengthy on this topic, but there is a it's not an easy pathway. We will say that. We'll save this discussion for another time. But thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll be back next week, and that concludes Pollock and Thurston.